Hello, I'm Anil Tamirano, teacher trainer. Welcome to another video in my YouTube channel, Empowering Teachers Worldwide. Today, I'd like to offer a few tips for developing writing skills in the pupil-centered classroom. We all know that writing is becoming an increasingly important skill in today's world. Teenagers use the written word in their own language to communicate both in social and academic contexts, and many of them need to develop good writing skills in English too. So, in terms of skills, producing a coherent, fluent, extended piece of writing is probably the most difficult thing to do in a language, even in the first language, and writing stories is no exception. So, many a times I have heard students complain that they lack the necessary vocabulary to write a story or a description, an essay, and it may be all right while they'll follow the step-by-step guidance that we offer or the course book offers. But what if they have to do a writing task by themselves, particularly of the narrative or descriptive kind? Students seem to operate in a very limited vocabulary repertoire. Sorry. While their passive vocabulary may be quite extensive, their active vocabulary is often very limited, and they end up using the same words over and over again. So people always walk or run. Girls are pretty or not pretty, and sometimes they can even be beautiful. And something they like is nice. If they don't like it, it's not nice. And you do things slowly or quickly, and that's it. So, one way of helping students build up their active vocabulary is to use semantic maps while they are brainstorming. For example, we can develop manners of walking, sounds made with the nose and the mouth, ways of speaking, verbs associated with light. So, ask the students how many words they know that describe, for example, different manners of speaking. They will probably come up with say, tell, shout, and very little else. So you can write a few words on the board and ask them to mimic the word if they know the meaning. If they don't, you mimic them and encourage the students to produce a simple definition in English that they can remember easily. You can, for example, use pictures to elicit the vocabulary. Suppose that you have these two pictures. What sort of vocabulary do you expect them to produce? You can work with lexical sets. Yes. So if you're dealing with places that we live, show the photographs, show pictures, and encourage them to come up with words. What vocabulary would you try to elicit from them with these two pictures, for example? And while they are working on that, you can build the graphic organizers, the mind maps, spidergrams, and annotate vocabulary that comes up. And they can record this vocabulary in their notebooks and build a vocabulary bank. For example, suppose that they have pictures of fantasy places like these. I'm sure you recognize them. One is Avatar, the Kingdom of Avatar. I don't know what it is called because I didn't see the film, but the other is Hogwarts. And ask them to compare these places with the other two pictures. Would they use the same words to describe these worlds, these places? What adjectives would they use? Elicit ideas from them. For example, magical, scary looking, huge, enchanting, mysterious, etc. Also, you can show pictures that have some kind of action. Let's see, like this one, for example. Yes, whitewater rafting. And so students propose words that come to mind when they see the picture. And you can have them working in groups and ask one of the students to be the secretary and write down the words in the group, or as a class, one student could help you write the words on the board. And then once you have a collection of words, you can ask the class, okay, thumbs up or thumbs down. So the class shows whether they like the words or not. And do this until, for example, you have 10 words on the board. So then students can work individually or in groups, you will decide that, and write a single sentence or sentences using 6 of the 10 words. You can stick the sentences on the board and have all the class read them. And for example, a variation could be, instead of writing a sentence with those words, you can elicit synonyms and antonyms. You can ask the students to find synonyms and antonyms and write sentences with them. You can play with a concept cube. A concept cube is a fun thing to do. To practice word functions, to employ word parts. Students receive a 6-square cube, which will eventually be folded into a 3-dimensional cube. And on each of the squares, they have to write down a vocabulary word, an antonym, a synonym, a category it belongs to, essential characteristics of the words, an example. So they cut, fold, and tape the cube to make a square. And then with a partner, they can roll the cube. And they must tell the relationship of the word that lands on top to the original vocabulary word. If we want them to write stories, for example, they can use comic strips, chain stories. We're going to have a look at that. Yes, for example, we can use comic strips or sequences of pictures as input for a story. You can do the activity orally first as a class to elicit vocabulary, and then they write the story in pairs or groups. You can use comic strips that you can find, I don't know, on the internet, or create. They can also, if some of the students are skillful at drawing, they can draw their own stories, or they can make a collage with the new dialogues. And they can personalize the story or write a totally different story. But at least they have some input. Yes, and that excites their imagination. You can also write chain stories. With chain stories are a suitable task for introducing children to the world of story writing, and it's very simple. You set the stage. That is, you select a theme. It can be a mystery story, a fable, a soap opera, a thriller, whatever. You decide. Then you have the authoring teams. There should be groups of 3. So each person in the team has a sheet of paper and writes part A of the story, that is the beginning, and passes the sheet to another person in the group. It can be done, I don't know, suppose, passes the sheet of paper to the person on their right. So now everyone writes part B, that's the middle of the story. When they have finished, they pass it on to the third person in the group. And the last person writes part C of the story. And then they can illustrate the story if they wish. And here you can allow them a choice. They can illustrate the story. They can create a video story. If they are older, for example, they can act it out and record it. They can add, for example, a soundtrack. Another possibility is the 5-card story. You choose 5 photographs or pictures, and you may have a bank of pictures. I don't know if people still buy magazines, but I still have from the old days when I bought magazines, or when I asked my hairdresser to give me some old magazines that are lying around. I cut out pictures and I prepare a collection of pictures. I mount them on card and I have a collection of pictures. So you can allow the students to choose 5 pictures, or you can divide them into groups and give each group a set of pictures, a set of 5. Yes? So you give them some viewing time, and then you can ask them 3 questions. And you can ask them to think about these questions while they are looking at the pictures. And the questions are very simple. What do you see in this picture? What makes you say that? And what else can you see? So you are encouraging them, you are allowing them to think, and you are encouraging them to look at the pictures and to look beyond the first impression. And they can come up with a story and a title for the story. Yes. They can discuss different perceptions of the pictures. They can discuss different points of view. And in their group, they can create a story. The story can be just a few lines long or something more elaborate. This will depend on the level of your students. They can also, again, they can video record the story. They can add a soundtrack to the story. They can create a storybook. In addition to using random photos to stir their imagination for story writing, this exercise initiates the idea of matching photos to storytelling, and it serves as an introduction to digital storytelling. You can also build stories from a character. For example, I find works of art really useful, particularly some of them. Edward Hopper is an American artist, and he's one of my favorites. And also Nigel van Veek he's also American. Here we have this picture, this girl here in the underground. This is called Q Train, and it is from the Working Girls series that he did in 1995. And this is one of my favorites. It's an image that I found on the internet a few years ago, and it's Vincent van Gogh, the Girl of the Pearl, and Frida Kahlo sitting in a bar, or perhaps in a train, in the dining car of a train. The thing is that you can give them photographs, perhaps of people or works of art, from newspapers, from the web. You decide. And you ask them to write a vivid description of the person. Ask them to invent a personality from how they react to the photograph. Ask them to describe how the person moves, feels. They can invent a life story of this person. And this can be done as a writing workshop in class. In groups, then they can read each other's descriptions, comparing them to the actual picture, and help each other to improve the texts. And then they exchange the descriptions and the pictures with another group. They read each other's texts. They can try to match them to the corresponding pictures. For example, in this one, in this picture with Van Gogh, the Girl of the Pearl, and Frida, you can extend this to more questions. What happened a few minutes before the scene? And what happened afterwards? Can they imagine the conversation? Imagine that one of them went to the toilet. What would be the conversation between the other two? Suppose that Vincent went to the toilet and the two ladies would go, "Oh, don't you think that this guy is rather weird?" And what conversation could ensure? There are lots of possibilities for helping students become more creative and helping them develop their vocabulary. It's also quite important to try and set up occasional writing workshops in class so that you can help them develop these abilities. But, well, that can go for another session. So, if you want to contact me, here are my details. Here's my email address. You can find me on LinkedIn and in my new blog, which is under construction right now, and of course here in my YouTube channel. So this is all for now. Till the next one.